Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about order of operations. We've got 3 videos on the order of operations. We're going to be starting with part 1, so let's go ahead and get to it right now. We're going to start talking about order of operations by giving ourselves a little acronym to remember the order of operations by. Before you've heard of PEMDAS, but now we've moved into middle school, we're going to use something that's a little more accurate and a little easier to remember. We're going to go with just GEMS, so just 4 things to remember as opposed to the 6 from PEMDAS. So let's start with G. G is going to be grouping symbols. So again, we're in 7th grade now, so we have many different kinds of grouping symbols. So we could be having things like parentheses, we could have brackets, we could have braces. And anytime that we have grouping symbols, we may have more than one grouping symbol. If we have more than one grouping symbol in something, we're going to be working inside out. Now let's look at E. E is going to stand for exponents and square roots. So again, I'm going to draw myself a little exponent here and a little square root, bring that down here. And when I have both exponents and square roots in the same problem, I want to make sure that I'm working left to right. Moving down to M, I'm going to be talking about multiplication and division. So again, if I've got multiplication and division in a problem, at the same time, I'm going to be working left to right. Even if division is on the left, I'm going to be starting with division, because whatever's on the left, it doesn't matter, multiplication or division, when I get to that step, the one on the left is the thing that I'm going to do first. And finally, we're going to end it up with subtraction and addition. So again, I'm going to draw my addition and subtraction symbol signs here. And again, addition and subtraction, once I get to that step, I'm going to be working left to right. It doesn't matter if the subtraction's on the left, that's the one I'm going to be doing first. So again, some key differences between PEMDAS and GEMS is when I'm dealing with multiplication and division, whichever one is on the left, even if it's division, is the thing I'm going to do first. Same thing with subtraction and addition. Whichever one is on the left is the one I'm going to do first. It doesn't matter if it's subtraction. So let's go ahead and take a look at example A. Here we are at example A, and I've got negative 18 divided by 3 plus 1 minus 1 times 4. So I'm going to take a look at GEMS, and I'm going to go working through my order of operations. But the key is I'm going to underline the parts that I'm working on, and I'm going to make sure that I'm copying everything down step after step so I don't make any careless mistakes. So I'm going to start with G, grouping symbols. Do I have any grouping symbols? Well, I have some parentheses there around the 1 and around the 4, but nothing's happening inside there. I can't do anything to the 1. There's no operation to 1, and there's no operation to 4. So therefore, there are no grouping symbols. So the next thing I'm going to look for is exponents and square roots. I clearly see no exponents, I see no square roots, so I can't be doing anything there. So I've got to move on to multiplication and division, or division and multiplication, however you want to say it. So I've got both in this problem. I've got negative 18 divided by 3, and I've got 1 times 4. Again, I've got numbers next to each other with no symbol in between, so that means multiplication. So I'm going to be going with the division in this case because it is on the left. So I'm going to underline that because that's the part I'm going to be working with. Negative 18 divided by 3 is going to give me negative 6. Remember, a negative divided by a positive is a negative. And then I'm going to copy down the problem just as I see it above with no other changes. So plus 1, bring down my minus sign, bring down my 1 in the parentheses, bring down my 4 in the parentheses, and now I'm ready for the next step. So in the next step, I'm going to go back to GEMS. Do I have any multiplication and division still? Yes, I do. I have this 1 times 4, so I'm going to go ahead and underline that. And again, I'm going to copy everything else down that I'm not going to touch. So I'm going to bring down this negative 6. Going to bring down my plus sign, bring down my 1, bring down my negative sign. 1 times 4 is 4, so I'm going to write that right down, and I'm going to go to the next step in my problem. For the next step in my problem, I've got no multiplication left, no division left. I just got addition and subtraction. So again, I'm going to start with the thing that's on the left. And in that case, that is addition. So negative 6 plus 1. The negative 6 is larger, so I know it has the greater, not larger, but the greater absolute value. So I know my answer is going to be negative. Since they have different signs, one has a negative, one has a positive, I'm going to be finding the difference. 6 minus 1 is 5, so that's going to give me negative 5 there. Bring down my minus sign, bring down my 4, and that leaves me with just negative 5 minus 4, or negative 5, negative 4, however you want to say it, means the same thing. So that's the step I'm going to be working on. Since I have the same signs, I'm going to be keeping it. And since they're the same sign, I'm going to be combining them or adding them up. And 5 plus 4 is 9, so my final answer is negative 9. And I'm going to go ahead and circle that on my paper so that my teacher can easily locate my answer on whether I was taking a test and a quiz or if I was doing a classwork, so that my teacher can easily locate it. And let's go on to example B. So here we are at example B. Again, we're going to be taking a look at our GEMS. I got grouping symbols around a negative 8, but there's nothing I can do with minus 8 or negative 8 in there. So nothing to do with grouping symbols. Can eliminate that immediately. Going on to exponents and square roots, I see none, so I can move on to multiplication and division. And it looks like I've only got one multiplication and division here. I've got 4 times -8. So before I get to that one, I'm going to copy everything else down just as I see it above. Copy down my -11, -7, plus 4 times -8. I got a positive times a negative, so that's going to be a negative, and I'm going to end up with -32. So -32, and I'm going to keep that in the parentheses because that plus and minus sign next to each other with nothing in between is going to be very confusing. So it's a good idea to keep that inside the parentheses so I know that I'm going to be adding -32 at the end. Going to the next step now, I've got -7, -11, plus -32. So I've got addition and subtraction. I'm going to start with the one on the left. So that's going to be -7 and -11. They have the same sign, which is negative. So I'm going to write that down. And since they have the same sign, I'm going to be combining them. -7 and -11. 7 plus 11 are going to give me 18. So I end up with -18. Bring down my plus sign. Bring down my -32. Now I'm left with just one step left, the -18 plus -32. So I'm going to be underlining that because that's the step I'm going to be working on. Now I've got double signs. I've got a plus sign and I've got a negative sign. So I have to clear them before I can add them together. So I've got a plus and a minus. That's going to give me a minus. So I'm going to rewrite that problem. -18 minus 32. That's a little easier to understand now. So now that I've got -18 minus 32, I can see that they have the same sign. They're both negative, so I know it's going to be negative. So I'm going to be adding them up. And when I do that, 18 plus 32 is going to give me 50. So my answer is going to be -50. I'm going to circle that answer so it's easily locatable on my paper for my teacher, whether that's for a test or a quiz or a classwork. And let's go on to the next example. So here we are at example C. I've got -6 plus 4 minus 2. Wow, that's very confusing. We've got a lot of signs in there. We've probably got some double signs we're going to have to clear up as we go along. But let's go ahead and get started right now. So using gems, I'm going to be looking for grouping symbols again. I've got -6 inside some parentheses, but nothing to do there. It's just -6 by itself in the parentheses. No work to be done. Same thing with the -2. So I'm going to eliminate grouping symbols. We're done with that. No exponents or square roots. These are kind of boring. We don't seem to have any of those. So I'm on to multiplication and division, where I don't really see any blatantly obvious multiplication and division. However, there is some. Notice I've got that negative symbol outside the -6, and I've also got a negative symbol outside the -2 with no number in between. When I see that, when I see just a sign by itself with no number on the outside, that means that I actually have a -1 out there. So now that I know I have a -1 there times -6, I'm going to have to do that multiplication first before I can move on to addition and subtraction. So I'm going to go ahead and underline that as the section we're going to be working on. -1 times -6, or a negative times a negative is a positive. 1 times 6 is 6, so I'm going to write down 6. Bring down my plus sign, bring down my 4, bring down my minus sign, bring down my -2. Now, curiously, if you hadn't known that little tidbit about the 1, you would have treated it as double signs, and you would have had a negative would have given you a positive, and you still would have ended up with +6. The double signs is just another way of knowing that that -1 is out there. So now we've got all addition and subtraction, so we're going to be starting left to right. So I've got 6 plus 4. I'm going to be underlining that. 6 plus 4 is 10. Bring down my minus sign, bring down my -2. Now again, I could have done -1 on the outside. -1 times -2 would have given me +2. That will work. However, I'm going to use the double signs here just to show that either way is correct. So negative and negative are going to give me a positive. So I'm going to end up with 10 plus 2 as I rewrite my problem. And 10 plus 2 is going to give me 12. Again, I'm going to circle my answer so that my teacher can easily locate it on my paper. And let's move on to the last example. Here we are at example D, and I've got -9 minus 11 times 3 plus 14, and let's get right to it. Again, no grouping symbols, not even a parentheses to speak of this time, so that's eliminated. No exponents, no square roots. So right down to multiplication and division, and we've only got multiplication, and it's right in the middle of our problems. So I'm going to underline that, and 11 times 3 is 33, but again, I'm going to write everything down exactly as I see it above. So my -9, my minus symbol, the 33 that I just figured out, bring down my plus sign, bring down my 14. So now I'm with addition and subtraction. I'm going to be moving left to right. So I've got my -9 minus 33, so I'm going to go ahead and underline that. They're both the same symbol. They're both negative symbols, so I know my answer is going to be negative. And since they are the same symbol, I'm going to be adding them up. So 33 plus 9 gives me 42. So I'm going to bring down my 42, bring down my plus sign, bring down my 14, and now I'm left with a simple integer addition subtraction problem. So I'm going to underline that. I've got a negative and a positive. I see that the 42 has the greater absolute value, so therefore I know my answer is going to be negative. Since they have the same, or they have different signs, I'm going to be subtracting them. So 42 minus 14 gives me 28, so I know my answer is going to be negative 28. I'm going to go ahead and circle it so that my teacher can easily find it on my paper and complete that problem. That brings us to the end of this video and this part of order of operations. There's 2 more parts to go, but this brings us to the end of this one. So go ahead, if you like this video, throw us a thumbs up. If you love this video, go ahead and throw us a sub, and we will see you in the next one.